Okay, so with our last dive into the god fruits of One Piece, we last looked into the Hito no Mi Chica, the forest god fruit. That fruit alone gave us a lot of insights just into what these god fruits were, how they function, and possibly what these other god fruits could possibly be. And today, we're going to be diving into our next god fruit, and that happens to be the Hito no Mi model Goka. And this fruit is full of mystery. It's not just as simple as one person having a double fruit like our Hito no Mi Chica. But what I will tell you is that the fact that we have understood the Hito no Mi Chica will further help us understand and find exactly what is the Hito no Mi model Goka, who has the Hito no Mi model Goka, and exactly what are the future purposes for the Hito no Mi model Goka. And by the end of this video, you will be fully understanding of exactly what these two god fruits are and be well on your way to what the third god fruit is. My friends, let's theorize for a second. So when it comes to this devil fruit, the Hito no Mi model Goka, we must first go back and look within the ancient kingdom. But not only that, we have to look within our present timeline too to really get to the bottom of this answer. We're going to be jumping back and forth from the past to the present. But don't worry, my friends, I'm going to make sure to put images and everything here clearly for you guys to see, because there are so many parallels that portray and show the exact answers of what we need about this fruit, the Hito no Mi model Goka. And the first thing I'd like to point out is the fact of our Medaka mermaid quintuplets. As we know, their names follow Ichika, Nika, Sanka, Yonka 1, and Yonka 2. We've already dove into Ichika themselves as the forest god. We already know who Nika is as our sun god. And of course, you have Sanka and Yonka. But today, I would like to dive into who Yonka 2 is, the fifth child who shares the name as Yonka 1. Why do two children share the same name? Because in reality, their names should just be 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It's all just Sino-Japanese order, as if the order of the gods. But the problem we see here is that it's just 4 and 4. They're both Yonka. And even Usopp goes, shouldn't their name be Goka? And this is where we start diving right into this entire mystery, because that name itself, Goka, that's the number in Sino-Japanese for 5. That's what our name should be. But it also translates to something very interesting, and that is 5 fruits. But the problem is, we only had 4 gods mentioned to us back in Skypia: God of the sun, God of the rain, God of the forest, and God of the land. So why are there 5 children here in Fishman Island? And the reason this is a problem because one of the children has the names of our sun god, shares the same color. They're all following number order. Oda put this here to show you the coordination. These are colors that coordinate with the gods. The names coordinate. And as referenced in our forest god video, the name Ichika translates to 1,000 flowers. This goes as far as the names, the colors, and the numbers all coordinating to show you that, hey, this is something important. But again, why is there a 5th child and no 5th god mentioned back in Skypia? Well, we can start looking into a few things. First, the one thing to notice, out of all the names mentioned for what are these supposed gods, Ichika, Nika, Sanka, Yonka 1, and Yonka 2, Nika is the only one that has a 4-letter name. And that name that we just found, Goka, which is what Yonka 2's name should be, is also a 4-letter name. Nika is our sun god, and this is one of the most important ideals, the sun itself. But another big thing that we get a lot of imagery for, even more imagery for than the sun, is the moon itself. And then when looking at this child, Yonka 2, the black and yellow color, if you look at the half moon, that's also black and yellow. So, the name Goka first translates to 5 fruits. Then you have the aspect of the fact that the child's name, who should be Goka, is colored after the moon, the second biggest ideal in One Piece other than the sun. And we're talking about 2 big ideals, the sun and the moon, 2 basic opposites, sometimes shown to be opposites within the show. Luffy is our sun god. His opposite, as shown in Jaya, is Blackbeard. And he brings this all together because when looking at Blackbeard, you see him as a child, and what is he staring at as a child? The moon. And it's not just that. Blackbeard himself is hunting powerful devil fruits. We learned this from Jinbei in Fishman Island after the whole Fishman Island episode. So, the idea would be how Luffy has the Hito no Mi model Nika and is the sun god. Blackbeard as the Hito no Mi model Goka and is the moon god. But it's not just as simple as him having the fruit, as I stated earlier. It's not like the Hito no Mi Mali Chica, because Blackbeard has two fruits, the Yami no Mi and the Tremor fruit. And he's likely even to attain a third fruit. As I stated, this is not something that's just simple, but I do want you to understand one thing. Blackbeard himself is not the moon god yet, how Luffy is already the sun god. Blackbeard is looking to become the true moon god. And this is why we're getting into the parts of why he has multiple devil fruits. Because all of this comes from an ancient being. All of these powers, all of these abilities that Blackbeard's getting, and the way that he's moving about within the One Piece world, it's all the will of a being from long ago. And that being is Goka. Similarly to how the Hito no Mi model Nika first belonged to Joy Boy and Luffy has it, but it originates from Sun God Nika, it is the same thing with the Hito no Mi model Goka. The same way the Nika's fruit's powers are based off of Sun God Nika, the Goka fruit's powers are based off of Moon God Goka. And who is Goka exactly? Goka is an ancient feathered serpent that comes from the times of the ancient kingdom, but well before that. The giant snake you see depicted in the mural, that's who Goka is. And Goka was a feathered serpent. Within the Harley text, we see and learn that the ancient kingdom was actually destroyed by this giant snake, this feathered serpent. And the snake didn't just come and appear out of nowhere. In the mural, you see that there are two sides of humanity, and they both seem to be on what is appears to be this ladder or this giant escalator that goes up, and it seems to be going down. But if you notice, only one side is going up and one side is going down. The right side's going down, and the left side, the people seem to be coming up and out of it. And that would match up exactly what was taught to you guys in episode 1 of our Ancient Kingdom series, that humanity used the souls of the dead, and they had to tap into hell, go within the planet itself to access these souls of the dead. And this is supported by within the mural, we are shown that the figures on the right who are going down actually within hell, they have halos on their head. Those are dead people. That they're essentially being fed as an energy source. Whereas on the left side, the individuals are coming out with this power, with this ancient energy source. This is an allusion to humanity quite literally mining the planet to nothingness and opening up the doorway to hell. And when you open up the doorway of hell, you open up the doorway to the creatures of hell. And that's exactly what this giant feathered serpent was. It was a creature of hell. The very same place that humanity had gotten this energy source from, that is where this creature was born from. It was made of the very same thing. And remember, this is all an allusion to humanity mining the planet to nothingness, destroying it, going within the Earth's core, just taking all of its resources out and destroying the entire planet. And because of that, this would cause a bunch of eruptions throughout the planet, a bunch of turmoil, essentially the crazy way the One Piece world looks today. And all these eruptions and these earthquakes are exactly what created the crevices for this creature to rise up from hell and to begin destroying the world with the flames of hell. And something that needs to be understood about this, it states that the earth god was enraged and the sun was enraged. So the sun allowed the serpent of hell to destroy the world. And not just the sun, the earth and all of its gods too. This contains the rain god, the forest god, the earth god themselves. Because remember, this all of this is humanity functioning and working to fast track and speed up the process of the way the earth functions to create human life for that human life to die and be reborn. They're just fast tracking those processes. And in this endless endeavor to gain the ancient energy source, humanity has destroyed the planet, upset the entire processes of the entire planet. So the rain processes, the water cycle, the processes of the forest, the photosynthesis, the whole entire process of Earth. The Earth was enraged. That is what is meant. And because of that, the Serpent of Hell was allowed to destroy the planet. It completely plunged the world into darkness, complete and utter darkness. They could not see the sun's light because they had already forgotten about the sun's light. And what's important about this creature, the Serpent of Hell, being used, humanity had gotten that energy source from hell. This creature was born from hell. It resided in hell. It was made of the very same energy source. So, as we see within the mural, with humanity taking that energy source out of hell and handing it over towards the creature, and as it states in the holotext that they worship the moon, humanity just began to worship this creature because this creature represented the moon. But not only that, it had completely taken the ancient energy source away from them, the sun's light, the sun's energy. And now, because of this, this was the only being that contained the ancient energy source within it. And humanity, desiring this energy source so much, began to worship this creature. This is why this creature is Goka, the moon god. because when the world had been darkened by this creature, and with this creature being the only thing to contain the ancient energy source, with the sun's light gone and this creature representing the moon reflects the sun's light. The only way for humanity to access or get this energy source or this light, this energy of the sun that was brought by the sun, was from this creature, and this is why they worshipped it. And this is all a direct parallel back to exactly what we see within Skypia. In Nolan's backstory, we see that they actually worship a giant snake known as Kashigami. And they worship Kashigami because if they do not sacrifice to Kashigami, he will come and destroy the entire world and all that they live on. He himself represents all the gods, the rain, the forest, the earth, the sun. He is all those gods in one. But as you notice, they keep this bubble blank down here, this space, and they don't even mention a moon god. This god has been forgotten. And this is similar to Fishman Island, where they mention a fifth child, but it seems like they don't even remember the kid's name. It just shares the name of another child, Yanka too. Not to mention, Kashigami himself is a feathered serpent. Kashigami's child, the child of Kashigami, is a feathered serpent. Kashigami's descendant, Nola, is a feathered serpent. And in Skypia, they have a depiction of a Quetzalcoatl statue. And Quetzalcoatl was another feathered serpent. Skypea happens to be a very ancient place, and it would make sense that they still are stuck within the same ideals that come from ancient times, worshipping a feathered serpent. And worshiping this serpent means you're worshiping the ideals of the moon rather than the ideals of the sun, where there's endless war, endless chaos, and endless fighting over the land specifically, which is the entire ideal back in Skypea. They're fighting slowly over the land. There are two wills being presented here, the will of the sun and the will of the moon. And the thing is, the moon at one point, this giant feathered serpent, was worshipped as the sun. It was seen as the sun god. So now it makes complete sense when looking at the ancient snake within the mural, and then you compare it to the ancient giant within the mural. They share a design. And the thing is, the ancient giant bloodline within Elbaf, they have a legendary devil fruit. This isn't just any devil fruit, my friends. This devil fruit is the Hito Hitonomi model Goka, the will of the moon god. And this is the will of a god who destroyed the world, and because of his destruction of the world, was praised as the sun god. He was worshipped as every single god. And he was mainly worshipped because he himself was a container and housed the ancient energy source within himself. And this is the one thing that humanity desired in order to manifest their own dreams and desires. And now it makes complete sense why Loki himself sees himself as the sun god who will bring about the dawn through destruction. That's not just his will talking, that's the inner will of his devil fruit, the Hito Hito no Mi model Goka. This entire story is all just an allusion to what would happen if our Earth's gravitational field were completely destroyed. Because if that happened, the moon would then just be freely floating. And if the moon was freely floating, the moon would move itself closer to Earth, and with the moon being close to Earth, our planet would be in straight turmoil. We'd have water spouts like the One Piece world. We would literally be living within the One Piece world. Humanity within the One Piece world has destroyed the much and minded so much that the world has completely destroyed and reset itself so many different times. And this keeps happening constantly because the moon keeps being brought closer to Earth. The moon is always too close to the planet. And if the moon's brought close to the planet, that means absolute destruction. And it'll be the death of this snake as to the reason that the One Piece world is able to be kept in this chaotic and terrible state. Because if this giant snake were to have died or to have been killed, that would mean the moon is still on our planet. And I shouldn't say still on our planet, it's still close to our planet. And comparing it to the snake, this would just mean that snake, it's still on Earth. And the snake was born from hell. The snake is not from Earth, which means it should not be on the planet. The last time it came, it brought flames of hell, destroyed the entire planet. And the fact that it's still running around today is a problem. This snake needs to be put down. And there's only one man who was able to do this, Joey Boy. So we went about paralleling this giant feathered serpent to the Skypian arc itself and the giant feathered serpent we see there. And following the ideals that you guys learned in episode 1, and that we have just followed about the fact of how the ancient weapon Uranus itself functioned. You take all of this information plus the information about this feathered serpent and place that next to Skypea, you get a direct parallel of what happened back during the times of Ancient Kingdom and what happened with Joy Boy specifically. And when looking at Skypea, and that is the Skypea of the past, not when Luffy and everyone showed up, that is the time of Nolan and Calgara, there is where we find our answers. because the one person who represents Joy Boy or our sun god within that little arc is Nolan himself. And what's very funny about that name Goka, just how it translates to five fruits. One of those fruits is characterized as is a Japanese chestnut. Skypia is all about the golden bell, which is characterized by five golden chestnuts, but also on top of Nolan's head, our Joy Boy for this instance, a Japanese chestnut. It's all right there in our faces, my friends. And with that being stated, with looking at Nolan as our Joy Boy, we can now start to parallel this to that ancient kingdom and figure out what happened to this giant snake and what happened from the point of this snake coming up, humanity destroying the earth, and this snake being left there to just burn the earth to the ground. Well, the first thing I would like to mention is the fact that it is pointed out that the people of Skypea sacrificed to this giant snake initially. So this is Joy Boy realizing that, hey, the people of the world sacrificed to a giant snake. That snake itself represented all the gods. This was the feathered serpent Goka. These are just two direct parallels. And just how the people of Skypea sacrificed to Kashigami to appease it and so that it wouldn't destroy them, the people of the ancient kingdom sacrificed to Goka for the very same exact reason. They did not want Goka to destroy him like he had done already previously. And as we see with Nolan coming into the story, he destroys the snake and cuts its head off. And that's because he doesn't agree with their ideals or their teachings, and because of it, it's making them live in a terrible and horrible way, and Nolan wants to stop that. This is the exact thing Joyboy had to do when it came to the ancient snake Goka. Joyboy was employed to liberate all of humanity just like Nolan was employed by his king. And these are all parallel. So when it came to Nolan himself, his example of whatever he needed to find was the city of gold, the gold of the ancient kingdom. That was something very important that Nolan needed to find, the city of gold. But this would not be the same for Joyboy. Joyboy himself had to find something different, and that would be he was employed to find the ancient energy source. But let's remember, Nolan didn't find the city of gold until he had actually saved the people of Skypea. And to be more specific, when he had actually saved the Shandorians. He saved them by teaching them that holding on to these dead souls is actually a problem. Trying to hold these trees, this is what's killing you. It's giving you a disease and it's infecting you. And it's also an allusion to the fact that holding on to the ideals of the past, the ideals of your ancestors, the fact of how they were taught to worship a giant snake that did brought nothing but destruction, that's a problem. They need to move on and let it go and move on to the next stage in their life. That is what Nolan taught everybody to do. That is what Joyboy taught everybody to do. And that was to be able to come to terms with death. And that is why all of Skypiea is based off of Aztec mythology. Because in their beliefs, everybody who dies goes to the flames of hell, is reborn through the flames of hell. They meet death. They go on a 4-year journey and just through the 9 levels of hell. And by the end of that journey, you meet death and you're reborn into a new vessel. It's basically reincarnation. That's what they fully believed in. And that's the same ideals you see within One Piece with the ideals of wills passing on, especially that we see them, all the wills being contained within devil fruits themselves and dreams being passed on. But here's the big thing about all of this. Joy Boy is not the main focus. The main focus of all of this is the moon god Goka, the ancient feathered serpent. But now we've established a clear way for you to clearly see how the snake moved throughout the world and what exactly happened with this ancient feathered serpent and Joy Boy himself. And if we're paralleling this to Nolan, after Nolan slays that snake, two things happen with two other snakes that are very important. Calgar himself slays the child of Kashigami. Two snakes were slain, two gods were slain. This was Calgar saying, hey, I trust you. I believe in you. Show me the truth. Show me the true way to actually live and go about doing things. And Nolan surely did that. And if Nolan is representing Joyboy, someone is representing Calgary, a native of the land that has been there for centuries, guarding an ancient treasure. If you're not seeing the picture yet, let me make it more clear for you. Initially, these two don't like each other. Calgary and Nolan do not get along. It's Calgary who really just doesn't trust Nolan because Nolan's not a native, he's a foreigner. Then Nolan, under a rock, still makes the same promise and has the same ambitions, and Calgary chooses to believe in him. And because of his belief, he sees that everybody around him starts to get healed, they start to get saved, things start to get better, and Nolan is taken and shown exactly where this ancient gold is. And that's the same thing that happened to Joy Boy. He connected with the natives of the land, and because of it, he was able to connect and find where the ancient energy source was. But due to a big miscommunication and a destruction of the forest and their own ancestors' souls, a big and giant confusion was brought about. Nolan and Kalgara fought, Nolan was sent away, but this was all wrong because eventually Kalgara found out, oh no, he was actually saving us. The trees, holding on to these dead ancestors, these dead souls was the problem. But it was already too late. They had already been knocked up in the sky by the knock-up stream, and they could forever just ring the bell, seeing that Nolan would never come back and they'd never get to see him again. So Calgary would sit there forever saying, I'm sorry to Nolan and feeling sorry to Nolan himself. And if you're now understanding the ideals of parallels, if Nolan parallels Joy Boy, who do we now think's Calgary parallels? You're exactly right. It's Zunisha, a native of a land, someone who's been there for more than 1,000 years. That story itself of Nolan and Calgara, their fight, their separation, never being able to return and talk to each other again, is a story of what happened between Joyboy and Zunisha, and how Calgara was forever sorry that he had wronged Nolan and never got to actually apologize. It is the same exact concept for Zunisha. And now that brings us back to our initial topic, how Nolan slayed Kashigami, Joyboy slayed the moon god Goka. But the thing is, we have Kalgra in this situation. Kalgra slays the child of Kashigami, and following the ideal of parallels, that would mean the moon god Goka himself had a child, just like Kashigami had a child. And just how Kalgra slayed that child to affirm their connection with Nolan, Zunisha had to have done the same thing with another snake. But the thing is, where is there another snake at? We don't know about any other giant snakes. Wait, do we? Holy shit. Amazon lily. Look at the island. It's a giant snake with multiple heads encased in stone. And something we noticed about Zunisha. Zunisha has a very soft and buoyant body. Zunisha's an elephant. That should be normal. But Zunisha's skin is hard and brittle, and it's getting more harder and more brittle. That's definitely not a word, but you see the point. We know Zunisha committed a crime and was sentenced. And that sentence involves roaming the earth endlessly through the waters of the world. And it surely has something to do with the fact that Zunisha is possibly hardening. Then I realized something. Amazon Lily, the leader of Amazon Lily currently has a fruit that could turn someone into stone. So it's led by a leader who can turn people into stone. They're based off of Medusa, a multi-headed serpent that could do that in the first place. It is characterized by a giant multi-headed snake that is encased in stone. Then you have Zunisha, who seems to be hardening and roaming the earth, keeping their bodies submerged in water, and there exists a devil fruit that could turn you into stone. Do you see the point? Zunisha was cursed to petrify. Zunisha is quite literally petrifying. It makes absolutely no reason whatsoever why Zunisha themselves can't go on land as an elephant, even if they were roaming the waters, even if they were walking on different lands. Some lands in the One Piece world are massive. Zunisha could at least take a few steps on these continents, but Zunisha cannot go on land for some reason, and I believe we just figured out why. Zunisha is cursed to be forever petrified, and if they do not stay submerged in water, the effects of that devil fruit are going to take place. This is also going to explain why Zunisha is also constantly watering himself. Yes, it helps the minks, but they have to do that so they don't petrify. And now we have to realize something. The snake we paralleled to Kalgara, the one that Kalgara killed, the child of Kashigami, we found it in Amazon Lily, petrified. We found the being that is paralleling Kalgara himself, Zunisha, petrifying. And the whole thing about these parallels, Nolan, after helping the people of Shandoria, was taken to the ancient kingdom. Well, the city of gold, I should say. Not the ancient kingdom, the city of gold. This parallels back to Joy Boy being shown the ancient energy source. And we've already established what the ancient energy source is and a place where it was contained. One, the ancient energy source is the souls of the dead. And two, that giant feathered snake was a housing agent for it. It was like a container for the ancient energy source. So, with this theme of petrification and turning individuals into stone, after this giant snake was slain, what happened to that snake's body? Where did that snake go? A snake that big, exactly what in the world happened? Well, my friends, there's a giant stone wall running around the entire planet, and that's the red line itself. They didn't just do anything with that snake's body, something that contained the ancient energy source within it. They took it and turned it into something that could still be used to control the world. And now when thinking about Doflamingo's message back in Drill's Reservoir, where he states if he had lost Devil Fruit specifically, he could use the ancient treasure of the Holy Land and he could control the world itself. You know what that means? He could use his fruit, put his own body into this snake's body, and have full control over the world. That snake would be essentially brought back to life. And we know this works because, for one, look at Gecko Maria. He did the same thing to Ors, an ancient giant. And it's funny because that's a direct parallel to what we're talking about. And they use an ancient giant. And look at Orz's number, SF900. We're talking about a snake from 900 years ago, my friends. It doesn't get any clearer than that. And the one thing about it that's very clear, we see that Gecko Maria was trying to control this creature. And that fully helps you understand now why the world government has a 5 billion berry bounty on lost fruit and exactly what the ancient treasure of the Holy Land is. It is that snake's body, my friend. And they turned it into the red line itself. Now, with all this information, we can now start to finally dive into exactly where this fruit is located, who has it, and just how everybody plays into this factor of this being Goka. And we're going to start within the recent arc of One Piece, and that is the Elbaf arc, because we get introduced to a very important person. Remember how I had earlier initially referenced the fact that Oars himself and his number SZ900 is a reference and a parallel to this giant snake Goka himself. And it's very interesting about the fact that they use an ancient giant for this parallel because it is in Elbaf that we find out that they have a legendary devil fruit that is passed down through only those of royal bloodline that contain the blood of the ancient giants within them. And one thing that Oda has shown us is that he likes to sometimes symbolize what characters' powers are going to be. An example would be Kaido. He had a bunch of dragon scale tattoos, and then he had a dragon devil fruit. Has anyone ever really taken notice to what Loki's tattoos are? They're like feathers. It's like a bird. But if you also look, it follows this long tail-like pattern, supporting that feathered serpent ideal. But what's even crazier about this is the fact that we stated how this feathered serpent, the original feathered serpent, Goka, got turned into the red line itself and turned to stone. Loki, within the recent chapters, he's depicted chained up against the Yggdrasil tree. And within the cover art where Oda gave us the official coloring for Loki, his colors and his tattoos, you see him chained up against the map of the world itself. And that leads to one answer. The fact that Loki parallels this giant snake being chained to the red line and being made as the red line within his cover photo tells us that Loki has the Hito Nomi model Goka, the exact fruit and the entire thing this video is about. And what's very supporting of this, Loki's introduction, he sees himself as the sun god who will bring about the destruction of the world. And we've been researching a being known as Goka, who destroyed the world being the moon god and then was referenced and worshipped as the sun god himself. He became the sun god because he destroyed the world. And now you should understand why Loki says he is the sun god who will bring about the destruction of the world. He has the will of this giant snake. That's the legendary devil fruit that's passed down on Elbaf. It is the Hito no Mi model Goka. And I believe the user of this fruit is going to have a snake-like body similar to how Nika has a rubber-like body. And now when I think about the fact of why Luffy has Gear 4 Snake Man, it makes all sense. It's all been put into light. And to go even further, if we go back to Little Garden where we meet our first two giants, Dory and Broggy, the one thing they state is that the only thing the giants of Elbaf cannot hurt or stain is the blood-soaked serpent or the blood-stained serpent. And that would reference everything that's being referenced in this video. The fact that that giant snake Gogo was turned into stone and made into the red line, red rock, a blood-stained serpent. But the mythology is what puts all of this together, my friends, because Elbaf is entirely based off of Norse mythology. Our giant who has this legendary devil fruit, Loki, his name itself is based off a Norse mythological god, Loki, the god of trickster, a god of cunning. But what's interesting about Loki is Loki had a child known as Jormungandr, the world-encompassing or the world-eating snake. This creature was stated to be one of the heralds of Ragnarok itself. And for those who don't know, within Norse mythology, the Aesir gods believed that in the future there was a prophecy that the giants and the gods would eventually fight, and the giants would win, bringing about the destruction of all the Aesir gods and all of the cosmos themselves. And Jormungandr, a snake that was known for being half giant, was at the center of this, one of the heralds for this. And I believe Jormungandr itself is the direct reference that our giant snake Goka was pulled from, the world-encompassing snake. Just like Jormungandr, this snake brought about the destruction of the world. And how it states Jormungandr was a world-encompassing snake that could have its own tail within its mouth and encompass the entire planet. That is a direct parallel to this giant snake Goka being turned into the red line and now having to encompass the entire planet, just like Jormungandr the snake. But this isn't the only mythology. We also have the Incan story of the Amaru, my friends. This was another dragon-like creature. And in this mythology, there's two deities mainly that are fighting over the land itself, which is the big ideal of One Piece, and that we're explaining in all these videos. The lightning and rain deity had the name of Parayakaka, and the sun deity, who was also a volcano deity, his name was Hualu Karinko. You see, this sun deity, or this volcano deity, he was getting his butt kicked by this lightning deity. He was losing very badly, so he summoned this legendary beast, an Amaru, his creature, his pet, to help him. And that it very much so did. It gave him a fighting chance in this battle against this lightning and rain deity, but there was a big issue. This lightning and rain deity themselves, they had 5 brothers to help them. And they ended up raising this large, massive mountain in their fight against this Hualukrinko, this sun deity or this volcano deity. And because of this, our lightning and rain deity, Parayakaka, was able to take their golden staff and strike the Amaru and turning it completely into stone. This creature's body fell down to the earth and laid there in rest and was encased completely in stone. The parallel from this story is very big because our sun deity would represent Joy Boy, and our lightning and rain deity would obviously represent his enemy in all of this, and that's Emu. And the Amaru is a parallel itself to the feathered serpent that Nika would have summoned, Goka. We also see that the lightning deity Parayakaka had 5 brothers. This was a reference to Emu and the 5 elders. And the fact that they turned this creature into stone and raised the mountain is a direct parallel to the fact that our giant snake Goka was turned into stone and turned into a giant mountain, the red line itself. So that's 2 mythologies right there. Jormungandr, the world-encompassing snake himself, and the Amaru, the ancient dragon which was turned into stone. But that's not just it. These aren't the only creatures within mythology that are dragon-like creatures that connect to our direct story of One Piece and this feathered serpent, Goka. There's also the Bakunawa, and this was the Filipino moon-eating dragon. Isn't that crazy? Moon-eating. And this creature was known to cause eclipses, earthquakes, rain, and wind. The same very ideals that our feathered serpent Goka brought when he came and destroyed the world. And within its mythology, it is the supreme god Bathala who actually brings 7 moons to the planet. The Bakunawa itself becomes entranced by the fact that the moon reflects the sun's light. And this also touches on another ideal in Hindu mythology, that the moon itself contains the elixir of immortality. And in order for the moon to have even been born in Hindu mythology, there was actually a story of the churning of the ocean where they accessed the elixir of immortality. And I'll be damned, they took a giant snake and a giant mountain in order to churn this ocean and access this elixir. The same snake they used was known as the Serpent King Vasuki. This Serpent King was a multi-headed serpent that always resided around Lord Shiva's neck, who was the god of destruction. But Lord Shiva also took claim to the crescent moon, which was born from the churning of the ocean to access this elixir of immortality. And those 3 things are all the aspects of Goka: the moon, destruction, and a giant snake. And this is very similar to our Bakunawa, who would devour the moon every 100 years. And this is what led to eclipses and earthquakes. It was all because of this creature. But when there was only 1 moon left, the Bakunawa would come to devour that moon, and the Filipinos would decide, hey, we need to do something to stop this beast and stop this creature. And you would be very shocked at how they do this. You see, this creature would emerge from the deepest depths of the ocean itself, an allusion to it emerging from hell, the underworld. And so the Filipinos ran to the edge of the ocean and they began playing loudly, drumming, playing music, which is very important, my friends. I'm laughing about this right now because the drumming that the Filipinos participated in to stop this creature, the Bakunawa, from devouring the very last moon of the world, directly references the biggest ideal I've been explaining since episode 1 on this page, and the biggest ideal you can find within One Piece. It's all about the music and the drumming that allows you to open yourself, open your spirit, become free, and live freely. Music will forever be important to this story, and just as important as you see it is for Nika, it's just as important for Goka himself. And before we truly jump into our last and final part, I would like to reference one more mythology, and this actually is coming from Norse mythology. There's a creature known as the Nidhog, and just like Loki, this creature was known for being chained to the bottom of the Yggdrasil's roots. But the Nidhogger itself actually gnawed on the roots of the Yggdrasil itself, and this was because this was very symbolic of its intent to pull the cosmos right back into chaos, into that destructive state. This creature itself was associated with the dead in hell and in Niflheim in Norse mythology, and Loki himself is trapped in the underworld of Elbaf. Not to mention, this was another dragon-like creature, another feathered serpent-like creature. These are all similar mythologies that Oda has taken and combined into one story about one being that brought the destruction of the world about, and that is the feathered serpent Goka. Man, oh man, that now marks another successfully done YouTube video up here and posted for you guys, able to watch easily and for you guys to sit here and enjoy and to kick back, relax, and just think about all things One Piece. And the best thing about this video is this is a 2-part video. I ended up adding 30 more minutes to this video, and I figured, why make them wait? Let's give them the first half now, and part 2 will be coming out very shortly for you guys, so stay tuned for that. This video here is a part of our God Fruit series, and this is episode 1 of the Hito no Mi model Goka. And episode 2 will be coming out shortly, but you guys are also getting episode 2 of our Ancient Kingdom series where we sit there going over the mural and the Harley text. And I'm not gonna lie, this editing is definitely kicking my ass, my friends, but you guys are loving the video, so we're gonna make sure we keep pumping them out for you guys and keeping them coming. So thank you guys for your support. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys in our next video.